this technology platform environment, et cetera. And you're like, okay, how do I do that? How do I do it as something that I don't come over all the way to the side as this thing I'm interacting with? The things that I'm seeing people who are pioneering this in an executable way, like people I would bet on to win this race, are really thinking of embedded, organic, adoptive AI, which of course is agentic AI, and how to do that. That's the part that takes a lot of art and a lot of science.
Everybody's excited. They're in one of these three stages. Either they're getting the foundations right, they're figuring out where their target is, or they're in execution. But there's a lot of excitement across the room.
But still, there is a tremendous amount of legacy debt that remains within insurers. I think this is a moment when all of these years people are talking about, no, we can't touch it because we don't know what it does. I think that can change. I think that's a huge opportunity I can think in terms of how generative AI can impact the way you can think in future.
What if you got to a world where you had an agent for service, an agent for looking in and down, an agent for looking elsewhere? What if you could string them all together? Now we're starting to get a little bit smarter. No longer is it one by one or in series, it's doing it all at once. The next step is, well, what happens if those agents that you've strung together can actually reflect on each other's actions? Now you start to get into a world of, now they're thinking for themselves based on what you tell it and you give the parameters to go do. And then finally, what if you could then go and get into things like external tools and sources? So you've actually started to replicate what we've been trying to do for a very, very long time in series, but almost all together, all at once. And we're going to go into way more detail, but that's broadly where I see Agentic coming together.
Bionic is a platform which is enterprise generative AI platform where we introduce this whole skill concept in it. This is typically not thought through by many of the products that exist. It starts from the skill and how do you orchestrate into making an agent, right? And then apply this agent. And when you make the skill, it's important to note that the skills have to be made along with real subject matter experts. So that is where the skill is actually going to exactly learn from a subject matter expert in terms of what that is required.
But then you get into the large language models, and the latest and greatest is less even about large language models which are pre-trained and kind of that are defined at the point of training, now are moving into large language models that allow for a heavy amount of compute at the time of inference, right? So if I can string this together, this is about what amount of thinking is happening when. What I like to think about is the slow fact, which is, yes, I have learned a lot from the data I got. Now I'm getting into a heavy amount of compute thrown at me at point of inference, which is I'm slowing down, thinking what I've learned from the data previously, what I'm being told now from the interaction I'm having with this. I have the ability to step back and rethink the answers I gave, the assumptions I made, and then move forward, which is very humanistic.
To call it like dynamic, iterative, you don't have a preconditioned journey. The journey is created as it's reacting to all the parameters. And I think the incredible point that this panel is bringing up is that's not a one solution shiny ball. It is a very sophisticated, we've now gotten out of the world of digital, we are in the enterprise architecture for solving business problems, layering of appropriate solutions that all have to work together, which is the only way you can power Agentic.
People are underestimating the amount of impact this journey is going to have on every industry, insurance being a big kind of part of it. And I even, honestly, like I'm looking at it saying, like, we're not far from the day when, 5% of the insurers have figured it out, and then they're getting a disproportionate share of the market, whether it's better underwriting or better kind of access to distribution.
I think the first and foremost thing that we're dealing with is making the insurance lovable, a capacity, a pricing, affordability, and a true coverage issue. At the end of the day, we do not have a real-time process that delivers risk and data exchange in an intuitive way that serves the customer. We more than have the capability. We more than have all the tooling in the world to make that happen. We do not deliver that.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today as we talk about Agentic workflows. I am Jennifer Lai with Quantiphi. I have been in insurance myself for about 27 years now. But I've got a great panelist here in front of me that's got not only a lot of experience as well, but very passionate about what they talk about. So I'm going to let them talk in just a minute. But I just wanted to see from the audience, kind of a show of hands, who is currently using agentic workflows or thinking about that for next year? Good. Okay. Because we're going to have some time for questions a little bit later. So we'd also love to hear from you all that raised your hands too, of share your experiences with it and what you're planning for the next year as well. All right. So we'll go ahead and get started. And I'm going to have each of the panelists introduce themselves, and then we'll dive into some questions. We'll start there at the end and work our way back.
Hello, everyone. My name is Farooq Sheikh. I lead the global insurance, banking, and healthcare businesses at Upcorp. Glad to be here.
Lisa Wardlaw. I am president and founder of 360 Digital Immersion. I'm also building Iris InsurTech as a startup. I'm building your technology. Spent over 30 years in industry, reinsurance carrier, consultant. Don't hold that against me. And no, I'm joking. I've spent my life decomposing and composing tech. So very excited to be here.
Great.
Nigel Walsh. I lead insurance for a big startup called Google Cloud. I'm sure I can get away with that still. Been in insurance for quite a bit, but probably not 30 years. I'm much younger.
Oh, you had to go there.
No, I'm not saying that.
And I'm Reghu Hariharan. I'm one of the 4 co-founders of Quantiphi. And it's great to be here with all of you here in this room, as well as some of the great partners that we have along with me in the panel. And thank you, Jennifer, for moderating this.
Absolutely. Excited to be here. I think we're going to go ahead and start with a question for all of you. And I just want to really kind of set the stage and understand, get your perspective on the challenges insurers are facing, just as things have evolved over the years and where we are now, and specifically talking about this agentic workflows and how that's going to change the industry. So I want to get your perspectives on some of the challenges that the industry is facing. And we'll start. Anyone who wants to start? We're going to go with Lisa.
I didn't realize it was a therapy session.
We need a couch for that one.
I think so.
You want me to start?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. I mean, clearly, there's so much that we're facing, but let's break it down into I'll lead it off. And then let you all layer on it. I mean, the first thing we're facing is that when we did digital, we didn't think of digital necessarily powering the future of where we are now with AI. And so clearly we've got AI, we've got traditional AI, we've got generative AI, and we've got agentic AI. And if you look at I'll start with economics. If you look at any of the macroeconomics, the economic yield curve where you actually get the ROI out of AI, it is not necessarily in the kind of blocking and tackling that we think. It's really in the embedded workflow, i.e. the agentic part. The problem that I think a lot of people are facing is it's coming fast, it's coming furious. Everyone's saying, I don't know who you all report to, but CEOs are like, get it in now. And you're thinking of this technology platform environment, et cetera. And you're like, okay, how do I do that? How do I do it as something that I don't come over all the way to the side as this thing I'm interacting with? So I think one of the things that I'm seeing people who are pioneering this in an executable way, like people I would bet on to win this race, are really thinking of embedded, organic, adoptive AI, which of course is agentic AI, and how to do that. That's the part that takes a lot of art and a lot of science.
I'm going to pick on a different angle, if I may. I often talk about making insurance lovable, which everyone smiles about. Obviously, no one in this room, well, maybe a few. But you get out of our 10,000 folks in Vegas and you go, I work in insurance, and the people will nod and doze off to sleep and whatever else. And actually, I want to take it from a customer's perspective, looking back in. It's been unloved for so long, unless you're a risk manager or whatever else. How do we now turn the focus of, we've got some really cool, great technology that can apply some phenomenal savings and benefits to every single part of the value chain, whether you're looking in and down or up and out. How do we get that to make people engage in a completely different and new way? And I think the cycles of investment for insurance over the last few years just haven't been there. I did an article recently with Insurance Business America talking about mainframes and legacy. So I also have a phrase that I've used quite a lot, that insurance is in love with revolution, We've been here 8 years, I think it is, 8 years now, where insurance was going to be disrupted by everyone and everything. And we're still here 8 years later, probably talking about the similar things about disruption and disintermediation and whatever else it might be. So whilst we're in love with revolution, I think the speed at which we operate, we're addicted to evolution.
I like that.
I'll add a perspective, right? I'll take the slightly different glass half full perspective, right? So the good news is, like in the beginning, Jennifer, when you asked the question, who's looking at Gen AI or looking to implement Gen AI, in 90% odd folks in the room were excited. And maybe they came here for that reason, right? That they're looking at this space actively. But insurance, broadly, more than any other industry that we serve, there's excitement around Gen AI and excitement around leveraging it for the tedious and the mundane and in some cases the cognitive capabilities, right? And everybody is in some place across 3 steps, right? Like either they're in the foundational, the point Lisa was making around data, and that foundation of data readiness and availability and silos, all the kind of complexities that come with it. Or they're in the, what is the kind of target state, and we want to use AI here or there, or not use it here. And for example, autonomous decision making always freaks out insurance, right? That's kind of one of those, let's not do that, right? However, as something that has more of a focus on agent assist or kind of decision assist becomes much easier a conversation. Something that's customer facing becomes difficult, but something that's internal becomes easier. So there's a debate around what the target state looks like, at least in the next couple of years. And I think then if you've gone through those journeys around getting the foundations right, getting the target state aligned, everybody else is now in execution territory, right? That's where there's a whole other ball of wax, right, that opens up and a lot of folks here can help with. But that's still complicated. I kind of look at it as everybody's excited. They're in one of these 3 stages. Either they're getting the foundations right, they're figuring out where their target is, or they're in execution. But there's a lot of excitement across the industry.
Absolutely. I agree.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I would, I was just thinking right now, like 25 years back, would anybody have imagined there'll be an event called InsurTechs, right? Because tech and insurance was so and then you have all of these legacy systems still running, many of the core process still. Over the years, people have moved over to, more product-centric, implementations. But still, there is a tremendous amount of legacy debt that remains within insurers. I think this is a moment when all of these years, people are talking about, no, we can't touch it because we don't know what it does. I think that can change. I think that's a huge opportunity I can think in terms of how generative AI can impact the way you can think in future. So that's the additional thing I'll add along with everything they said.
Yeah, and I think, a little later we'll talk a little bit about kind of that adoption piece of it. But I think it goes along to the how do I get started? Where do I use it? Where's the best place to use it? So appreciate that. We're going to go ahead and start with Nigel. And I want to get your perspective, so the characteristics of agentic workflow, but then also talk a little bit about what innovations Google is bringing into this space and in facing overcoming some of those challenges.
I've got some cheat notes with me, so I don't forget the key points. But I do want to go back 27 years.
With my paper files, yes.
I was working for a company that did web self-service, email deflection, online chatbots, and people looked at me like, no one's ever going to communicate this way. And I feel, the reason I mentioned it is I feel like we're still here doing exactly the same things. Like email deflection was going to kill every single contact center agent on the planet. And I seem to, it just, as we've come back to agentic workflows and contact center and all those cool things, it just reminds me we're constantly in this ongoing cycle, no matter what the challenge that we're thrown at. So the things that we're solving today, I feel are the same problems we were solving all those years ago, and probably long before I was wearing long trousers, but with just better and different technology. And it's really given me a moment to think, to go, what matters here? Is it the technology that we're using, or our ability to adapt, be agile, change, and embrace that really quickly? Not like mainframes or whatever else, which are 10, 20, 30, 40-year cycles. Yep. So when it gets to the world of agentic, I go back to what we did with RPA. And I'm looking around the room, people are going, RPA, here we go. And it's like, we've all been through that phase. And we remember a little debate about it before we started. It was the promise to put the sticky back plaster between legacy systems that didn't talk to each other. And I remember being there where you take the screen character between the row and the horizontal to work out where it was, and then what happened if it moved around, and then the technology got smarter and better for all that. We've all lived this life. We've all been through this point in time that when here's the latest and greatest technology to do a certain thing, this moment in time happens to be agentic. And I'm actually quite excited by it because, to your point, it feels like we're almost at another inflection point. I think if you were at ITC 4 years ago, was it blockchain was a buzz back then?
Oh, you're going.
I'm not going there. I'm not going to go there. But it was
Don't ever be on a panel with Nigel. He just grinds it.
but it was going to be the thing that solved everything. And here we are, and it's not probably solved as much as the world thought it was going to solve or whatever else it might be. So there are some things that will be interesting, but maybe not relevant for every industry. There are other things that are going to be relevant for every industry. And I do think this is one of those moments. Generative AI was probably new to every single one of us. Most of us probably didn't read Attention is All You Need that came out years ago. We've seen what OpenAI and ChatGPT did to society, let's be really honest, which is phenomenal, right? I mean, my kids have been taught how to use it in the school. I don't for 1 second worry about our next generation of workforce because my kids at 15 and 12 are being taught how to use new tools. It's all of us. I say all of us, we're all the same sort of age, right? So all of us in this room and the next generation, how do we get those folks to use this sort of stuff? So when it comes to Agentic, first of all, let me share what it is. So I've written down like 5 things that are important. If I go to RPA, rules-based, step-by-step, configure, program, etc. Agentic, very much iterative and multi-step. So the old argument with RPA used to be you'd automate an arm and a leg, but it means you couldn't take out a body. So you'd still have all the people, but none of the benefit. So now they're just less efficient than they used to be previously. Now with iterations and multi-step, you can actually go, I know the end-to-end task, and I am a former consultant, so I do apologize, but take out the whole task. So that actually gives you massive benefits straight away. What if you got to a world where you had an agent for service, an agent for looking in and down, an agent for looking elsewhere? What if you could string them all together? Now we're starting to get a little bit smarter. No longer is it one by one or in series, it's doing it all at once. The next step is, well, what happens if those agents that you've strung together can actually reflect on each other's actions? Now you start to get into a world of, now they're thinking for themselves. You haven't got to pop out to Bob and accounts to make a decision like you would in an old human in the loop. It will do it for you based on what you tell it and you give the parameters to go do. And then finally, what if you could then go and get into things like external tools and sources? So you've actually started to replicate what we've been trying to do for a very, very long time in series, but almost all together, all at once. And we can go into, and we're going to go into way more detail, but that's broadly where I see Agentic coming together. And as Google, to the second part of the question, for me, the magic is all about, we have a platform called Vertex AI. It's where all the AI capability and platforms all come together, whether you're doing document ingestion, voice ingestion, images, video, we don't care. But how do you glue all that together and give it back to an agent, a customer, a broker, whatever else it might be? And we're constantly updating it at a pace that I would say it's almost hard to keep up with. So if you think back to the market 12, maybe 14 months ago, nothing. The speed at which models and new capabilities and new features are being released is just mind-blowingly fast. And I go back to my opening comment. I don't worry about the technology or the next release or whatever's going to go on. I worry about our ability to adapt and be agile, to accept, and then deploy that at scale in our organization. I'll talk for hours, so I'll shut up.
Oh, no, that's fantastic. And I think you're right. It kind of goes back to that adoption book. We want to get started. How do we get going? And are people going to be using it? How are they going to use it and adopt to it? So I think that's great. All right, we're going to start with you next. And I just want to get some perspective from you on what you're seeing from your customers at Quantiphi, and how is Quantiphi kind of reimagining workflows in the agent form and bringing that new process into bear with your clients?
Got it. Okay. Yeah. So when many of the things that Nigel mentioned is maybe repeated in a little bit technical concept, right? First and foremost is, if you look at insurance as a process, there is so much amount of skills, different types of skills that exist in an insurance organization. People don't realize it. Like, if you look at it, every single thing individuals are doing is like a skill, right? So if you talk about agentic workflows, I would really start from a persona. Persona is like, it can be a claims adjudicator, you can be what you call a claims processor, etc., right? So you take each of those personas, and those personas they do a lot of different skills. So you break it down into the skill level and actually leverage these skills using techniques like, there are concepts of instruction-driven, directed, what you call acyclic, processes that that allows you to build those skills, right? Those skills, then you leverage it to actually create agents to complete a specific set of tasks. So this is the concept in a nutshell that goes behind the whole agentic workflow, right? Now, what we have done within Quantiphi to answer your second question is, there are two platforms that you should look at. Some of the folks out here in this audience might have already seen it, but if not, you can go back and refer to our website as well. There is a platform called Bionic. Okay, Bionic is a platform which is enterprise generative AI platform where we have implemented we introduced this whole skill concept in it. This is typically not thought through by many of the products that exist. It starts from the skill and how do you orchestrate into making an agent, right? And then apply this agent. And when you make the skill, it's important to note that the skills have to be made along with real subject matter experts, right? There is a lot of human intervention in that at that stage of it. So that is where the skill is actually going to exactly learn from a subject matter expert in terms of what that is required. So for example, a skill could be very easily, let's say, a fraudulent claim check, right? Or it could be extracting all of the information from a policy document that could be leveraged for what you call subsequent steps, right? And then stitching together of these actually becomes an agent, and therefore the agentic workflow, right? Now, if I go back to parallel to the old world, okay, there are a lot of actions that are initiated through these skills, right? Now, in the old world, many of you would have heard about subroutines and procedures in the past. I'm going back all the way to how we used to write mainframe code. You can always link like that to that, right? These are things that will be reused again and again. Right? Yeah, this you can reuse again and again. The whole concept is create the skills that can be reused, and it's AI driven, it's automated, and then link it together along with subject matter experts or human in the loop along with it. So that is the concept of it. The Bionic actually enables that. That's one of the things that we have invested in. And it is to be noted that we have been in this field for now. I've started thinking about, we talked about legacy mainframe. Believe it or not, there is a legacy AI, right? And it's if you think of it, it's crazy, right? Legacy AI is like pre-generative AI. AI looks like a legacy AI. So we are a little bit legacy AI company turned into a generative AI future company as well. So we have also gone through this. We have invested in actually building this Bionic, actually thinking through all of these generative AI concepts. The second platform is Docufy. Many of you might have been familiar with. So Docufy is just an intelligent document processing platform. The combination of these two, when you create those skills, is important, right? And the beauty of the whole agentic workflow is also the fact that it can actually, on the fly, with intelligence, really give an output that it's not otherwise possible. So, classic example is, let's say, through the Docufy process, you're able to extract a lot of information from policy documents. And let's say we take the case of a broker. Now, this broker is actually wanting to send in, ask some more information from a carrier before they actually quote it. You don't have to now give the same set of questions to each of these carriers. That's the typical way it happens, because now you can customize it automatically, intelligently, to only ask the questions where they don't have enough data now. So that actually speeds up the whole process. This is what is actually going to change with the agentic workflow.
Real solutions to the problems we're facing to really speed up those processes.
Yeah,
absolutely. Anyone?
I'm going to challenge you on legacy AI.
Yeah.
Only in that I think, and would love your view, generative AI came along, it was the answer to everything. We've all seen it from our exec. Everyone's gone, let's get Gen AI in and working. It's going to take out all our people and be magic, like wave the magic Harry Potter wand. It's not the case. And it's not the answer to every problem. So traditional AI, I'm not sure what everyone calls it these days, or legacy AI.
It's traditional.
It's traditional AI. Has its place.
TAI. You know, this anyway.
Is that T?
He doesn't.
The point being, if deterministic tasks need traditional AI. But if there's a summarization task or an agentic task, you might then string it together in different ways. But actually where the power comes is when you stitch those, like Bionic and Docify, is you stitch those things side by side.
Yeah.
I think that's the real value add for these.
Yeah, I think the point here is like, even if you go to traditional AI, right, the way the traditional AI itself is done is changing because of generative AI. For example, the type of training data that is required.
Yeah.
You don't do the way that we did before. Now it's generative AI induced, right? I mean, this is like the world when, when every IT services company used to be asked about, what is your digital revenue? It's a funny question, right? Everything you do in a computer is digital revenue to me, right? I mean, people used to decide to quote what they wanted. But now, if you really look at it today, even when we do traditional AI, there is some amount of generative AI used in that process.
Yeah, but there is something there, right? So if I may, there is historically the traditional AI, legacy AI, machine learning, whatever you want to call it, right? So there's a piece of work and a set of capabilities that have been developed as an outcome of that. Then we get into this new world of generative AI, and especially the distinction being the large language, also with the short language models or short models that were, to Nigel's point, much more specialized for specific tasks, and they were struggling to get to kind of the more generic or generalized problem-solving capabilities. But then you get into the large language models, and the latest and greatest is less even about large language models which are pre-trained and kind of that are defined at the point of training, now are moving into large language models that allow for a heavy amount of compute at the time of inference, right? So if I can string this together, this is about what amount of thinking is happening when. In the traditional AI, the amount of thinking is very deterministic. I need a set of criteria, I need a set of patterns that can be extracted out and codified. That's the traditional AI, the pattern, right? And that function of technology limitation, function of kind of progress in this domain and so forth, but it's data science automated. Then you get into generalized or LLM world, you don't need to predefine the next step, right? Because that's kind of what they're figuring their way by probabilistic approaches, by being trained on a large corpus of data, right? If they can live within the degrees of freedom that data provides them, but they're generating this. And now you're getting into what I like to think about is the slow fact, which is, yes, I have learned a lot from the data I got. Now I'm getting into a heavy amount of compute thrown at me at point of inference, which is I'm slowing down, thinking what I've learned from the data previously, what I'm being told now from the interaction I'm having with this. I have the ability to step back and rethink the answers I gave, the assumptions I made, and then move forward, which is very humanistic, right? Like, so like the long way of saying this is like, if you think about the humans' problem-solving capabilities, it's not just let's take patterns hidden in data and apply it to other problems. It's not just I've learned a lot of data and I can solve any problem, but only the data I learned in the past. It's very iterative, it's cognitive. I think this, like latest iterations of Gen AI, especially with the inference-based capabilities, is the closest I've seen, frankly. And so you're very right, it's kind of one thread, but it's getting closer and closer to the human cognitive problem-solving capabilities. And then when you string the agentic capabilities together, now you have those 5 different skill sets that you referenced earlier, right? Like the claim adjudicator taught to the billing person, taught like to, now you get into the real stitching together of human-like, intelligent problem-solving processes with some human-in-the-loop characteristics. So that kind of feels very exciting to me. It feels very different to me, frankly. Yeah. So that's kind of that's why I want the glass half full guy. Pointing at every time.
Look, when Benioff releases Agent Force, it's going to be big.
Yes. Yeah. Sorry. But I think that it all comes back to the word workflows, right? And so I think and just, humor me for a moment, but I was absolutely never a fan of RPA. Never. Like, I was always like, RPA is a Band-Aid for a bad problem. Solve the problem. The problem that I had is I didn't have the technical power to achieve what I was like voicing to my technical team. I was like, stop it. The only thing they had was preconditioned logic, rules, and paths. And then you'd have to code all that up, and then you'd have to tell system to follow it. And not only is that bad for workflow, decisioning, just FYI, horrible. It does not equal personalization by any definition. It's a pre-contrived journey that we create multiple outcomes to. We use data and we shove somebody on the journey. And I, as a human, I'm always like, don't put me on that journey. That's how we all are like operator, right? Mm-hmm. And so the beauty, if I were just thinking,
it's very calm. Nobody's shouting operator.
I'm screaming it. Rest option, exit, hang up. I won't even talk about my insurance carrier that force routes me to a claims adjuster voicemail where I can't get a single human being. Whatever, we'll talk about that later. But the point here is that Agentic is, I used to call it like dynamic, iterative. You don't have a preconditioned journey. The journey is created as it's reacting to all the parameters. And I think the incredible point that this panel is bringing up is that's not a one solution shiny ball. It is a very sophisticated, we've now gotten out of the world of digital. We are in the enterprise architecture for solving business problems, layering of appropriate solutions that all have to work together, which is the only way you can power Agentic. You have to have, we haven't mentioned it yet, but you have to have decision logic. Like within the Agentic, right? Like you have to have these layers and layers. And I think going back to the challenge you asked, Jen, is that when we were doing digital, we were able to shortcut some of these foundational things. I'm just being real. And in the world now, I talk to a lot of CTOs, CIOs, CEOs. They're like, let's go. This is where you get the ROI. And I'll say something simple like, cool. But if you bring all this in, what BPMS orchestrator are you going to use? What decision logic are you going to use? What suite of LLMs are you going to use? What cloud provider? Like all these decisions become very, very, very important. And most people think, that I can go to the shopping cart. I can talk to somebody in a booth. I'm just going to keep it real. They're going to promise me an end-to-end vertical solution. I can sign on the line and all my problems are solved. And I'm here to tell you that the componenting and decomponenting of the tech and the partners you need to interact with, it's like you got to take those bricks, blow them apart, and then work with people that understand it is a sophisticated layering of those things to achieve your business objectives. I think that's the biggest fallacy that people think. Like, I can just go get it from one place. Like, by definition of the people on the stage, it is a multifaceted solution.
I will add to that. Actually, I have this debate a lot. There are so many great startups out there doing some really cool point things.
I agree. But
the flip side to that argument is, are they features or are they businesses?
Right.
And I think back to my point about evolution. Over time, like you've seen the Pixel phone or the iPhone grab new capability. Like early on, we used to get a business card app. We used to get a scanning app. And they're all there by default these days. So I have a strong belief that while people will solve a point-in-time problem today, in the future, that's, in my mind, I'm biased, right? That will be part of a hyperscaler. Us, Amazon, Microsoft, whoever it might be, that will be part of there'll be a part of what we do by default, not an individual business, which means you don't need to be an integration shop. And that's the hard part. That's why I quite like Agentic, stringing all these things together, underpinned by a strong data foundation. And it's all pointing back to one place for me. I am biased.
Great. Thank you. That was very, very good in terms of really setting the stage of what we're doing differently, how we're doing it differently, and what does it mean to bring all those items together and change the business process to really solve a problem. So I appreciate you giving some time to support that. I want to, Farooq, So, you and Ncork, you guys have spent a lot of time, you streamline and your automation, your workflow generation, and we've touched a little bit on LLMs. How does that change for you with the use of LLMs and agentic workflows in the Ncork world, in the workflow generation?
It's kind of all these components that right? Like Lisa kind of alluded to it, and I did too. So in Gen AI, we're seeing a lot of kind of use cases that fall across three domains. There are three different types of use cases, right? So there's the let us go wow the user, internal decision assist mostly today, more tomorrow. But let's go do that in the context of a business process. We need to create a message, a marketing message or email. We need to construct and evaluate a risk and do some underwriting or onboard an agent, what have you, right? So there's a whole bunch of AI. Claims is another domain, right? Like, so lots of AI getting leveraged for digitization and decision assist of fundamental insurance business processes. That's kind of the predominant part. There's a second piece of it, which is kind of more in the spirit and the vein of let's kind of simplify and modernize some of the legacy infrastructure we have. So we have this mainframe and that mainframe, and they have data models of their own, and all that can be rationalized and can be streamlined and harmonize that using Gen AI and filling in some of the gaps. So there's a big piece of work there. And then the last work is just developer experience and prompt engineering, which I think of all the things you can learn today, like that's the thing you can start today. With prompt engineering and developer experience from a platform perspective becoming a big topic as well. These are the kind of places where we're looking at. But there's, the way I see it, we're 1% of this journey. Okay. This journey is going to go for a while, and the amount of impact people are underestimating the amount of impact this journey is going to have on every industry, insurance being a big kind of part of it. And I even, honestly, like I'm looking at it saying, like, we're not far from the day when, 5% of the insurers have figured it out, and then they're getting a disproportionate share of the market, whether it's better underwriting or better kind of access to distribution. But we're getting to that point where winners and losers are going to start to.
Interestingly, for anyone who was at the Tokyo Marine Day yesterday, they did the reverse pitch and showed, here's all, I think 6 problems they had. I'm sitting there scratching my head going, these are the most basic human problems that we have in insurance. How have we not solved these things yet? It's still the same thing around submission and ingestion. And I'm like, Mike, what is it going to take us to go just fix this once and for all as an industry? Or are we going to be here in 8 years' time going, oh, here we go again. It's the next wave of technology.
I'm going to be half full and half empty.
Okay.
Half empty is if you solve those things the same way you've been solving them, incremental, digital, crawl, walk, run, and you're going at the same thing with the same approach, and you just go get a better horse to do it, you're going to be basically, sadly, spending a lot of money throwing AI at a problem that is not going, we will be talking about it in 8 years. Right. That's my glass half empty.
We are going to talk about it in 8 years, unfortunately.
For sure. Because guess what? I hate to say this, and I'm known for being very blunt. Most people are not thinkers. Most people are, let me get a blueprint. Let me stay in a zone where all my people support it. I don't want to break the status quo. I'm going to go with it. And here's what it's going to take. I'm going to be the glass half full. The glass half full people are saying, this stuff that we've been trying to solve for 8 years, where the technology was not yet available. I mean, think of quantum computing, think of all these things. Technology always usually is an adoption curve of 20 to 30 years behind. Even the internet, personal computing, 15 to 20 years, right? Like all of these things have yield curves. If you are the person that says, I am not going to incrementally, I'm not saying you don't do a stepwise approach, please understand that. But I'm not going to incrementally solve this the way I tried to solve these problems of the past. I'm going to rethink the problem. Like a great example is document ingestion. How many people in this room used to have digital routing suites? I did. I used a different BPMS tool for it. But I took all my data in, and if it was a JPEG, I routed it one year. If it had handwriting, I routed it another. If it was a preconditioned form, I took it into my OCR suite. Anybody do that in this room? Yeah, you still have it probably, right? Okay, if you try, my thesis, if you try to throw AI on top of that, you're going to be exactly in the chair that Nigel is saying 8 years from now. You've got to rethink, do I need to recognize handwriting at all now? How do I stream the agentic workflow together? Again, I think that it's so solvable, which is why I'm like podcast after podcast, thought leader after thought leader. It is so solvable, but it requires thought. I don't mean that rudely. It requires taking the path less traveled. It's like the solution, sadly, want you to go vertical. All the VCs reward that. Go straight up, end-to-end vertical. The solution providers are rewarded for that. And componentizing things is not a natural reward of our industry. You need to partner across a multifaceted set of people that will help you solve an actual end-to-end problem. And I don't mean to be rude about that, because I want every single person in this room whose role and job it is to succeed in deploying this to be successful.
It's a different way of thinking than we've seen in the past, where it's traditionally that single place you go to, and now you're looking at who do you bring all to the table together.
But your point on the, let's say, do we need handwritten notes to be, done? What I see is there is a lot of customer base. Believe it or not, I was speaking to another insurer. They said they still get fax.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And their
I was doing that without doing
mail room is so massive. So their customers actually are writing things, and then, so fundamentally that issue still exists. To me, to your point, we have to figure out what is the amount of that type of problem that you want to focus on and prioritize, the big ticket items, like in low-hanging fruit, so that we can knock off all of those things and get to those. It's a prioritization.
To some extent, it's about the decisions that we make. I was chatting to a client that wants to get better at ingesting checks. I'm sitting there going,
get rid of checks.
Why don't you just say no? And the attitude is we can just digitize it and it's our problem, then rather than just turn around and go, we don't want your business because it's going to cost us $30 million to go solve how we ingest this small number of checks. Just say no.
I agree.
Yeah. And I think it's so sad that even today, if you look at all of the countries in the world, US is the only place where you have so much of check going on, check writing going on. You can't see that anywhere else in the world in the new economy. Right?
I might say that in 2017, I totally eliminated checks being received by one of the largest reinsurers. But I had to say no, Nigel. I said no. Everybody's like, what? I'm like, not doing it.
Well, and I think it goes to my next question, actually, for you, Lisa, talking about from a consumer side. And it goes to how are they impacted? What are their benefits? And things like this of saying no to the check impacts that. So how is that going to look different for the consumers as well as the employees of carriers and agencies? Do you have a view on how you see the benefits for those consumers? And then I think we'll talk a little bit about where we think some of the adoption challenges are.
Yeah, so I've worked across the whole value chain, right? So I kind of started consulting, then reinsurance, then carrier, and now I spend a lot of time in distribution. And never in my life, I thought I'd seen it all. Never in my life have I been like, wow, I really hadn't seen it all, right? I think the first and foremost thing that we're dealing with is making insurance lovable, a capacity, a pricing, affordability, and a true coverage issue. So yes, I'm an operations person and I get under the hood and I talk about all these things, but at the end of the day, we do not have a real-time process that delivers risk and data exchange in an intuitive way that serves the customer. We more than have the capability. We more than have all the tooling in the world to make that happen. We do not deliver that. There's report after report after report. You can choose which one, life and annuity, P&C, et cetera, where we do not delight our customers. In fact, we create often, I'm being honest, only because I want to solve for it, we create fragmented, frustrating, and disappointing experiences. And by the way, this isn't just at the point of claim. We do it when we're placing risk, et cetera. And so in my opinion, what we need to do to delight is apply the power of agentic AI embedded workflows for those people interacting with the customers so that they are enabled to delight those people, so that they have information at their fingertips, so that they're not saying, please fill out a 30-part information form like we use the broker questionnaire. By the way, if you're an independent broker or agent, you're not just dealing with one questionnaire. You have 5, 10, 20, and you're asking that poor person the same questions times 5, 10, or 20.
It's already provided.
Right. I mean, it's like, you know what? Could you actually ask this of me, the customer, in a once and done intuitive way? Right. And so like the power of this is unlocking and eliminating the madness, which is our status quo today, which is, well, if you want me to quote it, I need all this information. And I call it the excusisms, not my fault. 5 different carriers ask it 5 different ways. Yeah, it actually is your fault because we can do it differently now with agentic AI. That's the power of this, being able to read this. So I say, like, honestly, we need to empower those people who you can't quote what you need to now to find the best price, to find the best capacity, to find the best, we haven't even talked about, do you want indemnity plus insurance, like parametric, all these layers. In order to find that, those people have a lot on their plate every single solitary day. So we have to make this very intuitive. Just like if you go ask ChatGPT, like, how do I do this? And we have to do it in a controlled, non-biased, secure, traceable, immutable proof way, right? Because that person dealing with that person has lots of fiduciary responsibilities with what they're doing. So the cool thing is this is all now possible if you put it together the right way. And so I think our impetus has to be to delighting the customer. And that goes beyond, I think the minimum is a chatbot, a co-pilot, whatever we want to call it. That goes so far beyond that. That goes to empowering those people with intuitive analysis and understanding, like almost like, I had this dream like back in 2016. I wake up in the morning and I ask Alexa, like, hey, what were the biggest this, that, and the others of the day, drop it in a report, send it to my boss, set up a meeting in 30 minutes. Oh my gosh, actually, again, the technology has caught up with that. Yes. I can actually do that today. So I challenge all of you, like those things that we used to visualize, or maybe I'm just weird, we can do today. And so that's my rethinking the art of the possible. That then goes into a ton of operations, a ton of ethical governance, security, like all that. You can't let this, you can't just go to an open source and plug this in and go. You have to be connected to your infrastructure, but that's all now possible.
And what do you think, you talked about kind of that status quo that's going to challenge it, and there's adoption challenges that come along with that. Any thoughts around where we think some of that adoption challenges will be?
From my perspective, I'm going to step out of change management because I just spent so many years doing digital transformation. And honestly, there was never a change management program in my mind, the way they were run, that, green dashboards aside, that ever yielded proper change management. So hear me out on this. Change management comes from making something so intuitive.
Why not?
That it's just better.
Right.
Like, why do we all use ChatGPT or, whatever we use? Like, I use Gemini. We all use it. I got to get some other words in there. Google, he's going to have a heart attack next to me. But, I use Gemini in all my daily processing. Why do I use it? Because it's intuitive. Like, nobody had to tell me to use it. If I am better off by using it. And so that's why the word workflow, and I would like agentic to me, it's like combining all these things. So I'm not having to go to 10 different places. If it's intuitive, organic, and embedded, I'm going to use it. So that's how you get through the change management hurdle. Like, I believe if you make it easy.
The first time I used ChatGPT, I'm like, am I really going to use this? And then all of a sudden it made a letter for me. And I was like, wow, I just pushed a button. That's fantastic.
I'd go a stage further and think, if we're just going to automate tasks, then agentic AI becomes the next RPA. It's got to be cultural from the top down. And my point about making sure it's lovable is we are brilliant at selling customers the next product. But if I work end to end around customer lifecycle or life events or whatever else, and you go out there to every carrier and ask ourselves how many chief customer officers exist that own the end-to-end customer lifecycle, not head of distribution, not head of sales, not head of claims, not head of underwriting. Who actually owns the customer? You'll probably count them globally on one hand. So that basically says to us everything that we need to know.
I think one of the opportunities that exists with this is your thoughts and imagination is going to be unconstrained the way you explain. Not just how the processes will be changing in future, but also thinking in terms of new products that insurance companies will come out as well. So the technology or the way to implement is not going to be a barrier. And the barrier of entry for new players is also going to be less because, it's easier to actually bring these things together. So both of those are true in my view. And in terms of challenges, in terms of what you should be careful about, as it's true with anything AI, the ethical part of AI has to be thought through at every single step of it, and not just focus on really shiny object and cool stuff and just move forward with it, in my view. People should really, really think in terms of whether it is going to create unexpected outcomes or unthought, people don't know what they don't know type. So they should think about it deeply and spend that, in my view. The second aspect is, as we were initially talking about, building those skills and reusable stuff. Data becomes a very important aspect behind the scene, right? I mean, organizations need to have the right set of data. If you teach AI to do things the way it is, if it is wrong, it will do it wrong. And it will always do it wrong, right? That's the best part of it. It's so accurate that it's not like human. Like at that point of time, some intelligence it will do, but the intelligence is driven by the data that you've trained it, right? So it is not easy. It's a little bit dangerous from that perspective. So people have to be sure that their data and their internal stuff is clear. But having said that, this always I say when most organizations we go, people say our data sucks, but that is not a great answer. Do you know why and where? At least start thinking from that perspective and move in that direction, right? And then bring it back into building skills and agentic workflows, etc.
And I just want to layer, because of course, how many of you all in this room use master data management?
No one. One.
A couple of hands. Okay. So first of all, if you're not using master data management, first of all, you should have been. Secondly, you have to in today's world. But the thing I want to layer onto that is the master data management companies are deploying AI to do things like, okay, anybody ever worked in a data team where you have to do relational mapping, ETL, one table to the other? The agentic AI is connecting from the master data management into the workflows now. So the problem of data consistency, data governance, data management, all these things, where we have the master data management tool over here, the RDM over here, we've got the ETL mappers over here, right? Like again, 10 years ago, I would say to my data team, I don't want to map the data. Find a world where I don't have to map the data. Well, guess what? That is coming on the horizon with Gen AI and agentic AI. And if you use the agentic workflows correctly, that then connects into what you're saying. So again, it's a multifaceted problem to solve, but those vendors are also solving for this. And then if you connect the Gen AI between, I'll call it generically, like the data management, data governance platforms, whatever you may or may not be using, to the workflows, that's where you start to solve these problems.
Yes. Just maybe in terms of challenges, right? Like it's clear there's opportunity. There's lots of excitement. So that's good. Technology's got up enough problems to be solved, right? I think focus might be one of the biggest challenge right now.
As in we can't do it all?
Well, I feel like people, especially as they start on this journey, they might be, they get overwhelmed because you look at this journey and you look at the technology that's available and the opportunity that's available, but at the same time, like you don't have the MDN and initial radiators and you're in mainframe somewhere. There's a big distance between where
you're on the wrong cloud provider, you know.
Had to get in.
So there's a distance between the starting point.
Yeah.
And
If
I think kind of focus to kind of at some point you have to put crawl, walk, run like one step ahead. Like that journey, as long as you have started that journey, that's a good place to be. And if you're still debating if, how, when, whether or not.
So actually, the crawl, walk, run has been used a lot, but I would change it to hack it, prove it, nail it, scale it. That's our mantra. So
I agree with that. Let's change follow-up run. I'm doubling down on your trademark.
So a further challenge to it, though, if I look at what we do with Google X and the Moonshot Factory, which we've all heard of, it's built Waymo and whatever else, they have a whole mantra around fall in love with the problem. And falling in love with the problem, one of the examples they give is, if we gave you a picture of a monkey on a pedestal and say, go replicate that, almost everyone by default would start by running down the road to Home Depot and making a pedestal, because we can do the crawl piece, tick the box and go, we're incented to start. But the mantra is, start with the hardest part first. And we all too often just go, well, let's get moving and prove something, which in some cases might be right if that's what our incentives are. But actually, why don't we start with the hardest bit?
Totally.
Because if we keep doing the easy bit, all we're doing is kicking the can down the road anyway.
Right.
I love that, Nigel. I used to describe it as, it'll sound stupid now, but humor me. I used to say, draw the whole thing out, solve the problem, and then just gray out all the boxes that you're not yet activating. And then activate, i.e. make some of the boxes Technicolor one by one. But get your foundation, solve the hard problem. I'm clearly a foundational girl. But solve the hard problem. And then, of course, allow for that box isn't fixed. It's changing. Like all these things are coming out. But have at least a blueprint in your mind of how you're going to solve the hard problem. And then just like any experiment, you can Technicolor the things and you can change it, but it allows so much clarity on what do I need to do? How do I activate the things that maybe I do or don't have? And you can start to run these things in parallel, not waterfall, right? Like you can start to put these things together and then, I don't know, I think it's like a way to solve while you have to get to an end state and prove value.
Yeah, and so I think we've talked a little bit about maybe some advice of what people can look at, how do they approach it going forward. Maybe we can take some time and see if we've got any questions in the audience. Yeah, any questions out there?
Or not.
Or not. All right, is there any last final questions? If you are...
We can't be here in 8 years talking about the same problems.
Okay.
With new technology. Please, God.
It's been thrown. 8 years from now, no more.
Nigel's volunteered to be the shepherd of the people that keep solving it the same way. So that's going to be him in 8 years. I'm going to be here for that one, by the way.
God help us. But we will all be here in 8 years.
We will. Be a different challenge. I get that. All right. Well, thank you very much for attending today and joining us, and to our panel for participating, and good conversation, some good ideas and some different ways that we're tackling this in the industry. So thank you all very much for attending today.
Thank you. Thank you.